understand and they learn over time.
Hey guys, Dilby here, welcome back to the channel. So today we're talking about East End dubs, finally. An absolute legend in the kind of deep minimal house scene. Something I really didn't realize about East End dubs before doing this video was how not prolific he is. He's actually released very little music, but all of that music has made a real impact. A lot of it's been on really good labels, the likes of Hot Creations, Hot Tracks, Fuse, Moon Harbour, and his own labels, East End Dubs and EastEnders. Funnily enough, on EastEnders, he's only done 3 EPs, 2 EPs and 1 like collab EP. So he's kind of said a lot with not a lot of music and been able to make a pretty amazing impact on the scene. I watched a really interesting interview with him in preparation for this, which was really cool and insightful. I'm going to talk a bit about that as I go through. But one of the things that he said in there was that he's a musician, he's a producer, he spends his time in his studio making music. He's more focused on making music than releasing it. And most of his tracks, he says, will never see the light of day, but his DJ sets are 95% his own music or music that's coming out on his label. Most of the tracks that he plays in his DJ sets are IDs which are never going to be released. So it's pretty cool. If you like the track that's playing, it's a new one of mine. There's a link in the description to Beatport and Spotify if you want to support that. I really appreciate it. As always, you can download the project files for this from Patreon. There's a link in the description to that too. Patreon is one of the best ways that you can support the channel. Make sure I keep bringing you these videos every week. Now let's get into Ableton and make some deep minimal house. Alright guys, so here we are inside Ableton and this is my little East End Dubs style project. We're rocking along with 129 BPM, pretty fast. Most of his stuff seems to be somewhere around 127 to 130, 132, but generally somewhere around that 130 mark at the moment. If you look back a few years, it was much slower, around the kind of 123, but this is kind of the tempo of this style of music these days. So it's the same track you heard in the intro, but let's just give you a wee refresher. So that's what we're working with. As always, we will jump in with the kick. This is one that I sampled from an East End Dubs track. As we do, here's a link to a video about how to do that for yourself for any track. Now on this alt kick, I sampled 2 kicks and I've left them both there. So if you want to use one, go ahead. That's if you download the project from Patreon, link in the description. So the kick, it is like a nice chunky drum machine kick, and you can hear it's got this little click on it that kind of sounds like bit crushing or something like that. It's really nice. It helps it punch through but still be really subby. If I pull out the top, very solid, and if I pull out the bottom, it's got this really sharp little punch on it. It's very nice, it really cuts through. So I've just monoed that and that's about it. We're just bringing it in and out in some places, and I've done these little kick fills before the drop. Claps. All right, so for the samples on this, East End Dubs has a sample pack on his sample label, Sample Market. It's a great website for this style of music. There's packs by like loads of the biggest names. Personally, I've bought a bunch of them and I've had mixed results. Some are really good, some feel like they were just kind of thrown together. But there is some really good stuff on there, particularly this pack, which is East End Dubs single hits. So we've got a couple of claps. So 2 quite distinctly different but analog drum machine-y sounding kind of claps. And what we're using those for is just to kind of thicken up the clap. And when I'm choosing samples to do this, to layer, I'm always looking for samples that complement each other. If I just kind of layer one 909 clap with another slightly different 909 clap, I may as well have just turned the volume up, right? So when you're layering stuff, you're trying to look for things that complement each other, that add up to more than the sum of their parts. Then on that, I'm using the saturator to pull off the top. I'll show you that in this Oscillos Megascope here. So we're just flattening out the transient. That's going to allow us to push the clap a bit louder without triggering the limiter on the master, because remember the clap is playing at the same time as the kick. So if you've got a really loud clap, this isn't particularly loud, but if you've got a loud clap and it's playing on top of the kick, which is probably going to be the loudest element in the track, then you're going to be triggering that limiter, which is going to be pushing down on everything playing in the track. We don't want that. So yeah, clap, pretty simple. We've got this little snare fill, which just kind of grooves along with the kick and the clap. Nice one. There's some really cool snare fills in this East End Dubs. There's some really cool snare samples in this East End Dubs pack. Lots of like interesting different drum machine sounds. Really good for this style of music. And that is the kick and the clap and the snare. Now we've got some hats. We've got quite a few hats. I'll show you this one first, which is a glitch loop. As I said in the intro, I watched a video with East End Dubs in his studio talking about his workflow and how he does things. He works with a lot of hardware and in particular some modular gear. So he was saying that one of the first steps in his process is to kind of create some weird modular loop and some textures to go underneath the track as a bed. And that's where he kind of sets the vibe. So he starts working with just like a kick and some textures. I don't have a big modular setup, so what I did to get that kind of aesthetic, remember a modular drum machine is generally like a noise oscillator with a sequencer and a filter. So what I've done is I've taken this percussion loop from my sample pack, Underground Shades of House, link up here if you want to go grab that, best-selling sample pack on houseofloop.com. Now let's see that in the browser. It sounds like this. Nice and groovy, but does not sound like kind of East End Dubs minimal style, and it does not sound like a modular loop. But what I've done is used the clip envelope here, pulled that in really tight to 24. Sounds like this. Turn off this filter. See, so that's like much tighter. We're just getting the transients. And then I've just turned this auto filter on with quite a bit of resonance, added some LFO to move it around, and then I'm using a band pass, and that's just kind of letting through a little bit of that kind of high end around 1K, and the LFO is just going to move it up and down. I've got the shape of the LFO set to noise or random, so it's going to be moving randomly, which gives it a little bit more of a, I don't know, modular feel, analog feel, I don't know. But it sounds like this. So it's this kind of ever-changing texture in the background, which helps to create like a really nice bed for the drums. Okay, so in terms of the hi-hats, we've got this kind of main open hat. I'm just using the clip length, the MIDI length, to create some differentiation in those notes. And that's going over a 1.5 bar loop, so that pattern is constantly changing. Then I've got this open hat, which is just playing once at the end of every second bar, but not the fourth bar. Just to add some kind of groove and variation. And now we've got a series of kind of 16th hats that are just playing some different patterns, but kind of working together. Hopefully, well, that's the point, that's the idea. This one here maybe works with these. And then these two are doing like a call and response type thing. You can see, sorry, no, they're not. They're, what am I talking about? They're doing, they're like playing at the same time, and they're different complementary sounds. And this one I think is more of a shaker type thing. No, it's very similar. They're just playing at the same time, but panning randomly differently. They're pretty similar, but slightly different. And it's just kind of thickening up the sound, and with that movement, it's just kind of creating a bit more of a textural, ever-changing layer. So all the hats with the kick sounds like this. Cool. And with the clap and snare. And then in the percussion, we've got this little synth percussion thing. So it just sounds like something that's recorded out of a synth, which is why I called it synth perc. So that sounds pretty cool, and with the kick and everything else. we're getting some nice grooves in the drums there. All right, now let's get on to the bass, everyone's favorite star of the show. Okay, so the bass is a patch from Drift. I've used this add some random for the velocity to give some difference in some randomization in the velocity. All right, so this is how it sounds. Very cool. Now if we look here, I've got a second auto filter with some pretty high resonance, a bit of drive and stuff, and that's just cutting out a bit more of that low mid kind of sound. So that's kind of the foundation of the sound that's being created by the Drift with a couple of sawtooth oscillators, but I felt like that was still letting through a bit too much in terms of the bass sound. So I wanted to cut it away, but also shape the sound a little bit with the resonance. That also, I'm not using it here, but that also gives us the opportunity to automate the cutoff here. So that could be used pretty well. So we've got this nice kind of skippy pattern playing around our root note of D minor. And so this is quite a groovy, funky pattern with plenty of energy. So here's it together with the kick. So really providing like a really solid backbone to the track. Now this I will come back to. So let's have a look at the melodic elements. And we'll come back to this Analogue bass here. So pad. Nice wee sound. This is just a preset called chord dub keys. And I'm using kickstart to just duck it to the kick. And it's kind of like just adding this kind of deep house vibe, I guess. This was something that I noticed he did in his breakdowns quite a bit, was introduce some kind of lush, deep sounding pads or something. So it really kind of starts to make it feel like a breakdown, right? Then we've got this organ. So this is something that I noticed he used in quite a lot of his tracks. It's almost like a bass, but because the bass is so subby, there's room in the low mids for this. That's another reason why I cut out quite a lot from the bass, because we had this kind of almost organ bass type sound that I needed to fit it in there and work with the bass. So that has got quite a bit of frequencies up here, and I'm doing that by playing a chord with this chord device. So if I take that away, so I'm playing down an octave, up an octave, and up 7 semitones. And then I'm also using this saturator to add in some harmonics. So if I kind of take away a bunch of this stuff, so that saturator is really helping to kind of push it up in the track and help it sit above the bass. And then we just got the kickstart and the glue compressor. This is the MIDI pattern, very simple stuff. We're just playing around the kind of middle of each bar and just kind of creating some variation to extend that loop out over 4 bars. But it adds like a nice little melodic hook in the track. And this acts as like a nice little turnaround, resets it every 4 bars. So now this glitch synth, again, I was trying to do some type of modular-esque. I think it's just an ARP preset from Ableton, and I've mapped the LFO here to this resonance so that it's just kind of changing it randomly. Again, trying to get some randomization into the track to make it feel less loopy, right? So what I've done here is automated this volume knob so that this sound is just coming up in a few places. Right, so if I turn this up, this is what it sounds like. It's a cool sound, but it's a bit hectic by itself, I think. It just kind of messes up the groove. Sounds really messy, chaotic. But with this automation, I've just kind of used it like a fill. You could also like record this and then just edit the audio clip. Now you could also bring it down a little bit in volume, I think. And what we might want to do is add a compressor, set the side chain of this compressor to the organ. So just make sure it's getting out of the way of that organ. And now, this was something else I tried, didn't really work. It was quite fun putting this whole thing together because I was able to just really experiment with trying weird synth sounds, because if you listen to his tracks, they've got this really kind of solid, classic house, tech house groove kind of thing. Really interesting bass lines, and then lots of weird synths. It kind of, by watching that interview that I spoke about, I got a real insight into how he works. And he just sits in his synth cave and just makes sounds and then throws them into tracks. And you can kind of hear that when you listen to his tracks. It was really insightful as to how he might work. I've got another one here, FM glitches. So I'm just kind of using this, like as you might use a crash or a white noise on the drop or something, but it's just a bit different, a bit more interesting. So this is the MIDI for it. I've just played it over several octaves. A. I'm not sure if I said before, I think I said that we were in D minor. We're not, we are in A minor. So yeah, that's that. Just a kind of interesting pattern. I just really experimented. I think I did it all on one octave and then just got weird with it, moved it over some different octaves, and it worked. Cool. Now we've got some vocals, and first of all, I'll show you this oww vocal. It's from a cappella which I sampled. Okay, and I've pitched it down to be in the key of the track and added some bit crushing to just kind of crunch it up. So it's kind of sitting there to work with the groove and also add a different texture. So a lot of this stuff is about call and response and complementary textures, complementary sounds. And then we needed a hook for the track, so I found these two little vocal samples. First one,
clubs or discotheques.
Some Spanish guy talking about clubs or discotheques.
The sound and they learn over time.
The sound they learn over time, or something like that. But anyway, in the track it sounds quite cool. And I've just put beat repeat on both of those to give it a bit more of a glitchy, weird, randomized feel. And then I'm just sending this to a delay on my return track. Here is one delay, and here's the other delay. These are just standard in my template, use them all the time. Here's a link to a video about my template where you can find everything out. So this is how it sounds.
Clubs or discotheques. The sound and they learn over time.
And there you just heard that little kick fill that I was talking about. So when I do kick fills, like the kick would normally be like that with the MIDI, I believe. No, even longer, like that. Right, so I just shorten them so that the sub isn't playing out so far, and it stops them from running into each other, creating a build-up of bass in that section. Cool, and last things, we've got some effects here. This texture, Mexican taco bar, apparently. It's just something from Loop Cloud. This was another thing that he spoke about in the interview, that when he travels, he always carries a recorder around and gets like random little bits and pieces and puts them in the back of his tracks. Always a great way to personalize your tracks and kind of put something about you and your experiences in there. And then we've just got this little snare fill. This is the snare fill.
The sound and they learn over time.
So cool little skippy pattern, just kind of building up the anticipation, and then we have a little pause and the double kick again. So just kind of getting some of those elements to work together, call and response type thing, and then create a bit of impact on that drop. Now, I was listening to a bunch of reference tracks, and I noticed that he had these kind of like deep house, deep tech grooves, and they were kind of often quite chilled, but then there'd always be some quite big aggressive synth sound. Maybe not always, but like often some big aggressive synth sound. And in the interview he was speaking about, he had just got a Korg Analogue, which was interesting because I'd just got a Korg Analogue and I decided to use it. So this is the MIDI. I just went for, again, over octaves, and I just kind of randomized the pattern it was playing, recorded it out, and automated the filter by hand as I was recording it. So this is the sound that we've got. Pretty cool. That's like quite loud, quite aggressive, and it really kind of adds a different flavor and a different vibe to the track. Normally, I noticed he brings these things in about halfway through the track. So you can kind of imagine if this has been playing and then we're in this breakdown, it's got these nice pads and chords and stuff. Things are sounding pretty chilled. We've heard like the vocal hook in that before.
Clubs or discotheques, the sound and they learn over time.
So that really stands out. There's so much dynamics there because I've taken away a lot of stuff to allow that to just really have as much impact as possible, but then we go back into the groove and we're keeping it there. And it just really adds like a bit more drama and a bit more intensity to the track. So that's about how we do. I noticed like breakdowns, not too long, quite frequent. There'll be like little mini breaks, and then usually one decent breakdown, but not too long, something around like 16 bars or something like that, max generally. And everything's pretty reserved. You'll see there's not much in the way of effects and that type of thing. Sometimes there's crashes, sometimes there's more fills, but generally it's kind of like experimenting with synths, recording them out and putting them in ways to create tension and release and groove in the track. So let's take a listen through from the start and see how it sounds.
Or discotheques, the sound and they learn over time. Clubs or discotheques, the sound and they learn over time. Clubs or discotheques, the sound and they learn over time.
Alright guys, how do you like that? How did I do? Is it close to his sound or not? Let me know in the comments. If you like this type of video and you're looking for something to watch next, then check out this playlist. There's so much gold there. Alright, well that's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace.